Hey everyone, so just a shout out for our sponsor, Picture House in the Small Darkroom. They've been an incredible partner for us this season for the podcast, and we're just so grateful to have them, and not just because they're sponsoring, but because we really love those guys, and we're actually doing a lot of stuff with them that we'll announce later, things that have to do with some programs the foundation is going to launch. So it's really gone from just sponsoring the podcast to a much deeper relationship. And I think that just says a lot about their values, how supportive they are of the foundation, of the PhotoWork Foundation, and how much they want to help out. And as everyone knows, I've been over there a lot to discuss things with them, and I have artists who print with them, work on various post projects with them. And it's just, everyone loves hanging out over there. At the lab, you say lab, it sounds so sterile, but it's like this really cool space. It's on a number of floors, and in Chelsea and New York.
Yeah, they call it their studio.
Right.
And they're an incredible resource. So it's a film lab. They do scanning, printing, retouching. They sell film. And of course, they have a bookstore with live events. And they have a mini lab where you can have prints made of all different sizes.
Love the mini lab.
They are Picture House in the Small Darkroom. Their website is PHTSDR for Picture House, the Small Darkroom.com. And so is their Instagram, PHTSDR. And you can check out the Instagram or the website to see if they're having specials or what's going on at the bookstore. And again, it's an incredible place to have in New York.
And you don't have to be in New York. You know, you can send them in film, start a relationship with those guys. They will take care of you. I promise. That's who they are. They are really committed to doing a great job for everyone, whoever you are, whether you're a big shot or a small shot. So, so check them out.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello, and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky and touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. Hello, everyone. I'm Sasha Wolf, recording from Woodstock, New York, back from my travels to far-off places, and happy to be reunited with this guy, one of my favorite guys, Mr. Michael. I'm not joining in because everyone
Peaches
would.
and herb, come on!
It would hurt people's ears, and any goodwill I have would vanish in the blink of an eye. Mr. Michael Chauvin Dalton, hello. Who knew you had the chops? Hi. Wow.
And you're back from Iceland, which was great and also probably a little stressful.
Well, just the ending. Peter Kaofis and I went to Iceland for our, I don't know, we've lost track, fourth or fifth time. It's where we go to go hiking. And then towards the end of our trip, there started to be a lot of volcanic earthquake activity, and the area that's most affected is very close to the airport, the only international airport. So, we cut the trip a little short just to make sure we could leave. But we had a wonderful trip, and I almost slid off a mountain, but I didn't.
Okay.
Peter did not react quickly enough, but I still love him. And I paid him back when we were at the end of a road on the eastern side of the West Fjords, and we got to the top of a mountain, and we hit an big ice patch, and it looked like the car might go over a cliff.
Oh, wow.
And I jumped out. I was like, good luck, Peter. I was like, I'm not staying in the car. I literally got out as it was sliding, and then proceeded to get my phone out and start recording it. That's the part Peter's most annoyed about. But I felt like, but anyway, we made it. It was a couple moments that were a little dicey, but that's part of the adventure. So,
Nice.
yeah, great.
Yeah.
It's a great time. And, I'm lucky to love where I am up here in beautiful upstate. So not bad coming back to beautiful fall. It's gorgeous here. So
Yeah. Back
No
to
complaints.
your wood stove. Yep.
Yep. Wood stove is roaring. Very cozy. So how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm feeling all good.
Yeah.
I was good enough to get my flu shot finally.
Oh, good.
So, yes.
Excellent.
I feel like I'm always giving a medical report now.
Well, you have kids and you teach and you're in the danger zone.
Yes.
My nephew Zeke and his girlfriend Tula are staying with me at my place in the city, and they're youngsters, and they both Zeke just graduated from college. They both got jobs at Trader Joe's, and they're sick all the time now. It turns out it's like working in daycare.
Right.
So,
Well, that organic food.
But they bring home so many goodies that it sort of
Nice.
cushions the blow of being constantly sick. They're like,
man.
I feel terrible, but I've got this huge bag of 3 types of caramel crunch. So, and mini spanakopita. Life is good.
Oh, I love their mini spanakopita. I'm a big fan.
The Trader Joe's podcast. Okay, so moving right along. So
Yes.
this is the second of our 3 shows that we recorded in Atlanta, and it's a conversation with the photographer Irina Rozovsky, and I love this episode personally.
Yeah, this is a really nice episode. And of course, Irina visited us while we were at the High Museum to see a long arc, photography in the American South since 1845, and Irina's in the show.
Yep.
So it was a really lovely conversation. Irina's really open and honest about the way her approach to photography changed over time, becoming a mother and a partner, and then relocating down south. And that had a big impact on her life and her practice. And this is a very practice-oriented show. It's fantastic.
It is. One of the things that really struck me about the conversation is how undefended Irina is. So everything just feels really extremely honest. I mean, I like to think that most of our guests are like that, but people have different.
I haven't told the truth once. I don't know what
That's so funny because either have I.
Yeah, I don't have kids. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't even like photography.
That's right. But yes, no, absolutely. It was really enjoyable.
Yeah, she's really open and just so honest about everything. There's like a way in which she seems really at peace with the way different things in her life have impacted her practice. Like a way of just really going with it and not fighting things and just adapting.
Including not even always thinking photography was going to be the final pursuit. Yeah.
Yep. That was really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and wait till you hear what sport she was in college.
Right. Right. I love those wacky little revelations.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good one. I was like, what now? Let's talk about that. Well, it was really lovely. It's a little shorter than some episodes. We started to get quite a bit of traffic in the area where we were recording.
Yes, you might hear a little bit of that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it started to build up as a meeting commenced right next door to where we were. So nonetheless, we get in all the good stuff and it's really lovely. So Michael, if you don't mind, please take it away.
My pleasure, and welcome back. And here is your conversation with Irina Rozovsky.
Irina Rozovsky, welcome to the PhotoWork podcast. It's great to have you sitting across the table from me. How are you?
It's great to be sitting across the table from you. I'm good. Nice to be
Yay!
here.
You and I have known each other for a long time.
It's true.
And we're meeting here in Atlanta. So thank you for driving from Athens, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia to be with Michael Chauvin Dalton. And
Hey, guys.
and I
Welcome
this
to
morning-
Hotlanta.
Yeah.
Welcome to you to the Peach State.
Yeah, it's swampy.
Yeah.
It was weird leaving cool upstate New York where I was, making fires and arriving in a lot of humidity down here. It's true what they say. Anyway, so we start every podcast with a guest's sort of journey. So biography, if you could tell us all about yourself, that would be great.
How far back are we talking?
Yeah, start at the beginning,
Is this a photographic journey or a...
Well, I think it's important that you were not born here. You hail from somewhere else, and so...
Yeah, I hail from a foreign land that was made more foreign by the politics of the Soviet Union. And then I guess I was 7 or 8. It was 1988, and we packed bags and we left. They put some jewels. They stuck some jewels inside my doll to sneak them out, and we said our goodbyes. And I think my parents were saying, like, just the very never see you again to their parents. And we went to Austria and then Italy. That was the
route.
The route. And there's some Jewish organizations that were bringing people over. And then we landed in Boston, North Boston, Lynn, City of Sin, and just took it from there. And then photography came into the picture in high school.
Where were you in high school?
I was in Newton. We lived.
So you were still in Massachusetts.
We stayed in Massachusetts. We just moved around based on work. But then we moved to Newton for the schools and lived on this street right under the telephone towers. It was like the cheapest place to live in Newton, just for the schools. And there was this incredible teacher, Mr. Bouchal, and he had long hair and played the trumpet and never walked into the darkroom. So the kids were always teaching each other. And somehow there's this like national prize for photography that brought people to DC, and he'd just be taking people there every single year. And I don't know how he did it, but he really set me aflame. And he gave me over the summer like a little suitcase, like a spy darkroom that I set up in the basement, and like a little fold out enlarger. It just was this like obsession, I never thought I'd be a photographer, but it was just a way to be in the world. It like really activated things for me.
And from there, from your little fold-out enlarger, what was the journey through, if you went to college or...
I went to Tufts for pole vault. I was a pole vaulter, and I studied French and Spanish.
The only guest who's majored in pole vaulting.
Yeah, it was, I would say, a very minute minor. And no, I was on the track team for like one season, and there were no other pole vaulters, so it was just always me against myself. And but I was spending like every living moment in the darkroom with one of the professor there was Roswell Ainger. And
Roswell Ainger.
Yep, R.I.P. And then I got out of college, and I had this French and Spanish major. I had lived in Spain for a bit, so that helped. I was doing like photography there, just finding darkrooms as I went along to sneak into. And then when I finished school, I thought I would be I don't know what I thought. Nothing really good. But then I just kept doing photography, and then realized there's no other path. And I went to Mass Art for grad school, and then got the chance to be a TA at Harvard with Chris Killip and Sharon Harper. And Sharon really took me under her wing and taught me a lot, and then sent me off to New York. And then I think I met you early on. I think I was taking like the secret Chinatown bus to your workshop.
Yep.
And bit by bit, I was teaching a lot. I was teaching in Boston and New York, just back and forth, and then got a full-time job at Mass Art. I had published a book about Israel, and then a book about Cuba, and then I met Mark, and we moved down here. And now we run the Humid, and
I want to talk a little bit about the Humid. If we can get to that. So I obviously know your work pretty well, But one thing I really had fun with was, reading some interviews you've done in the past and finding some really great nuggets there that I want to ask you about. So you did an interview in Rocket Science with a guy named Jack Dees, and he asked you about getting into photography and whether that was the plan. And you said there was never a plan, just a gradual realization that photography was what I needed and wanted to do against all odds. I had never formally studied it, so I threw myself into an MFA. I had a few interesting jobs after college that used my Russian, Spanish, and French, but I always felt like an operator relaying across cultural divides a message that I could decode, but that didn't belong to me. The part of the brain where languages live is a very fertile place for me, but photography was a truer form of communication, the most expressive means I knew by which to actually say something. Can you talk about that? Because I know that, of course, that's how a lot of artists feel, and it's something that we just sort of take for granted. But I want to talk about it a little bit, that moment, because I, studied art as well, and I had that moment. I read that and I was like, yup, I had that exact same sort of epiphany in my life. And it is hard to explain, but I thought, let's give it a shot. So can you talk a little bit about, if you remember the moment where you realized that this was the way you wanted to communicate to the world?
I don't know if I ever thought about the world, I just remember having all these jobs. Like I had this amazing opportunity to work. We first came to Lynn when I was a kid, and then somehow I got this call after college when I was completely flailing and just taking any job sort of related to languages. And they said, do you want to run an after-school program for refugee kids in Lynn that they had come from Africa and Afghanistan and some from Russia? And I said, of course. And then, I'm working with these kids, and yet half my brain is taken up with ideas for photos of them or projects. And then in the end, it ended up being like, we got a donation of all these cameras and film, and we would just take photos and have organized their photos. And so the effort it took me to stay in the moment and do a job without thinking about photography was so much greater than actually doing photography. I would have all these translation gigs, and it was always just all I wanted was to photograph the people I was talking to rather than actually talk to them. Yeah, I think I was just fooling myself that I could do anything else. And in terms of communicating to the world, it was never really, I don't think I had an audience in mind. I think it was just...
Communicating. I should have ended the sentence there, communicating.
Yeah, I think it was just like a kind of bouncing off the surface of the world in front of me, just as a confirmation that I'm here and I'm seeing this, and that the world is a kind of like clay that you could mold and interact with through the camera.
When that's happening and you're realizing that this is something that you feel sort of urgency or a must be in your life, what work are you looking at? I mean, who is starting to make a mark sort of in your photographic DNA of your psyche?
Well, I spend a lot of time in the library at Tufts, and I think before, and I would just pile up these stacks of books, and in those piles was Malik Sidbeh was a big deal for me, and Nan Golden and Eggleston for sure. I remember calling Eggleston, like trying to find his phone number, in the yellow pages, and finding some Egglestons in Memphis, and calling his son to see if I could go down and meet Eggleston. And they had just had a storm, and they're like, oh no, Bill's not available. But, see, I think I talked to the wife of one of his sons. I don't know what son that was, but I looked at Jeff Wall and, Billingham and Rinneke Dijkstra, just the classics. Yeah, just kind of trying to inhale it. Lartigue, I remember, was really mind-boggling when I first saw.
And who did you study with at Mass Art?
At Mass Art, it was... Well, I had first, kind of snuck into Mass Art to try to use their color processor, and I had like kind of a grad student who I learned color with, and then bumped into Abe and Laura in the hallway, and I was like, I just want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so
Abe Morrell and
hungry.
Laura McPhee.
Yeah, I bumped into them before I actually applied, and they're kind of giving me the up and down, like, oh, okay, maybe one day, and then, but I actually was studying. Yeah, Abe was my first semester, and Barbara and Frank
Barbara
Golke.
Bosworth.
Yeah, and Nick Nixon and Matt Connors. Matt Connors made a big impact on me, actually.
I didn't realize Matt was there when you were there. But.
Yeah, I think he had just come the year before.
So the Israel work is your first, am I right about this sort of really comprehensive body of work that goes out into the world?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that work? And
Yeah, I was thinking about it on the way over here, because it's surreal to be in the midst of the news and think about what the hell I was doing there. And well, what happened was I got there without the aim to photograph. Of course, my camera was with me, and the minute I got there, my anecdote is that I realized that I didn't bring enough film. That was just like my first realization that this was going to be really big. And it was the first time I realized that what was going to happen discreetly there. Like I had to do, everything I was going to make was about this place, and that the place was just so layered and had so many sides besides the two that are always in the news, and that the struggle was real, and the struggle was at the root, in the DNA, and in the landscape. It just was very pivotal for me and kind of mind-shattering. And that even though I'm Jewish, and I was just sort of like a channel, and I was hoping to. Just everything I saw was about this struggle, this kind of fight. The fight was at the kind of the root and in every particle of that place. And that the fight is, sadly, from what I saw, was not like resolvable. You, Sasha, personally put the idea in my head to go back a second time because I never considered the idea of a reshoot. I just always was, photography for me was like, how could you reshoot it? Everything's different. The light is different. The subject's different. Things don't stay the same, And in grad school, there's always this, well, this image doesn't work out. Why don't you just reshoot it? And it just always seemed preposterous to me. And you said, I had gotten to Israel on kind of this spontaneous whim, and you looked at the work and you said, well, maybe you should go back. And I said, this woman is crazy. And then I just couldn't get the idea out of my head. And it was the first time that I realized, in my early career that, of course, it is about this enduring return. And so, thank you.
My pleasure. In looking at your work in sort of a different way, not as projects have come out, but just sitting down and really looking at everything, getting ready to talk to you today, it really struck me how cohesive all of your work is, which is just not the case with a lot of people. And a lot of people it is the case, a lot of people it's not the case. But you have a really strong visual style. Do you agree with that, or?
I'd love to hear more. I don't know.
So yeah, I see in some ways it's like, I hadn't thought of this before, but some of your pictures remind me almost of Rinko Kawauchi a little bit, which is a compliment. Love that work. But just the incredible lushness and sort of meets languid, there is a real languid quality to a lot of your work, which I think is very you in a way. It makes sense to me. It's almost as if you can feel you yelling at us, no, because it's languid, so you're not yelling, but you imploring us gently to slow down in your photographs and pointing at it, often the banal, but making metaphor out of it. But even when it's not the banal, often the bodies and pictures have a certain languid quality. It's funny because in some ways it's like the fact that you're now down south, where it all feels like that to me, like makes perfect sense. But how do you think about it? That's
Well, thank you. I'm going to take everything you said as a compliment. I'm just going to do that.
It's a compliment.
Thanks. But yeah, I mean, language is a big deal, like reading and literature, but not in a big L snobby sort of way, but that a picture should be read. I mean, I would hope that a picture can be like a poem or like a story, but I used to write stories, and writing is important to me, but I have a really hard time writing an essay, and it has to, in a kind of analytical way. Like I can't analyze anything, but I can have a feeling towards it. And so I think everything is an attempt to analyze and always a failure to analyze, and every photo is a impression and a expression of a feeling. I think I operate on first impressions. That's why when I get somewhere, I start making pictures quickly. I'm not the kind of person that needs to like research and take my time. Like things happen very quickly for me in the immediate response. And like first impressions are always, hit me really hard and deep. And so...
Well, I can read you something you said in that same interview about that. You said, because I love this, so if you don't mind, you said behind the wheel, you stop being conscious of the actual driving. Your mind drifts, and then you've suddenly arrived. I don't know why that makes me want to cry. That's what shooting towards a nebulous end goal feels like for me. It's happening in another kind of consciousness. I think photographers make a lot of decisions and edits constantly without being aware of them. I like to work in a mental space where the decisions sort of make themselves. I'm steeping in a haze, but somehow arrive at the whole. It's not always so smooth. I really love that.
Thanks. I have no recollection of writing it, but it sounds okay.
It's great. I really love it. You go on to talk about the way you're working now, which has changed. But before we get to that, can you talk about that? Because, that's a very specific way of working. You're talking about the more intuitive approach to working. Obviously you have to have a really strong foundation. So how do you balance what you know about photography and how to make a good photograph with giving yourself permission to stay in that very sort of, there's a great word for it that I'm just not thinking of right now, that space, that more liminal space when you're shooting?
I think you kind of go in and out of different like mental states, Sometimes you just see something and it knocks everything off kilter, and you realize that maybe the way athletes respond, where it's just you're not thinking, you can't think, but at a certain point the thinking kicks in. But I do believe that you're always
athletes who have trained their asses off to then be in the moment where they can catch the ball,
react.
Or right.
Yeah, and I think that reaction can be dulled, and I think a lot of people, maybe even now, they curtail it, or and I see this in myself too, like if, you have to, and that's why, I love Mark's work, and because I see him practice it. The picture's always a priority. Yes, even if we're late, he'll stop the car and he'll take the photo. And whereas I have to swallow it, I'm like, oh no, okay, maybe later, just lately. But yeah, I think there's different kinds of instincts. There's the mental instinct that needs to kick in at a certain point, but in the moment of shooting, you just know, it just hits you, and at least for me, and you just hope and pray that happens. You could be like in complete doubt, or in a spiraling out of control, but then the picture comes and it's like this clarifying, oh, okay, there it is.
And then what about editing? Because when you shoot the way you shoot, you can wind up with a lot of work and a lot of shaping that needs to happen. A lot of photographers are sort of editing while they're shooting, and it's much more conscripted, and there's many more boundaries. And so you're out there and you're working in that space where you're really letting your instincts guide the pictures that you're making. Then you get into the studio, you have all this work. How does it get shaped?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you do sort of edit as you shoot, but you don't know what you're editing towards. But maybe this sounds hypocritical, but in a way, like each photo, you're sort of weighing what you've made already. Maybe I'm at a point where I can have this sort of mental like catalog of all the pictures I've made. So as I'm shooting, there's an editing aspect of like, okay, is this repetitive? And usually it is, but
why? Because you're drawn to the same thing.
You're drawn to it, right? And then sometimes you're like, wait a minute, I've shot this, but is there a different way, or is there? Yeah, but of course, each person only has like 3 or 4 things that they can do, and in terms of editing after the fact, I kind of always think about, this is important to me, take note. Like I like to echo the feeling of shooting in the editing. So hopefully that the book or the show or whatever I'm editing towards can echo or embody the act of taking the picture. Can sort of, I don't want to take the essence of the photo away from it. So, for instance, the work in the park, the book
In plein air.
I hope that the book
Published by Mac.
copy's still available. The book can, from beginning to end, can somehow circle back to the act of seeing, or making the pictures.
I love everything you said in this piece so much. I'm just going to quote it one last time. You said, more recently, since becoming a mother and moving to Georgia, I've had no opportunity to get lost in distant lands, and my way of making photos has come entirely undone. I've turned to photographing in a way that's difficult and awkward to understand. The camera is not so much the third eye that it used to be, but a conniving provocateur. I make hundreds of photos of essentially the same thing, like a basketball player practicing a layup. It feels balletic in its individual movements, but the entirety is still unknown. Do you remember writing that?
When was that? That was like 2018?
I don't know what year it was.
Oh my God.
Let's talk about this new way of working since you moved to Georgia and became a mom and a partner.
I think a lot of it has to do with also shooting digitally, and I shoot a lot with the phone, and I think that medium almost like requires repetition. You've got the kind of the blast, you can blast through things. And, I used to tell students that when you're shooting film, you have your 12 darts and you preciously and precisely try to throw them towards the center. And then when you're shooting with the iPhone or the digital camera, it's like you've got this big ass bucket of darts and you're just throwing them haphazardly in the air and hoping something will stick. And I've had to embrace that, because it's, it's maddening, but also kind of liberating. And the editing happens much faster. I'll take a lot of pictures and then I'll erase them all to make more room on the phone. I mean, it's really chaotic. The editing is just like in real time. As I'm shooting, I'm looking and then I'm fixing. But it's a different extension. It's just like another way to shoot. It's maybe a little bit more like just a very different pace.
It sounds like equipment and gear is not very important to you.
I think it's important in that it does shape how you operate, how I operate, so it does change it.
You're going with the flow. You're like, I guess I'll just
But I got to make a picture.
Right.
And I also want to stay true to the equipment in that the camera sort of has a part in what the photo experience is and what the photo will look like, but also, I'm aware that film and a medium format camera has its own romance, and I want to embrace that and push that, and that the digital camera or an iPhone has its own language. And so what can you say with that?
What do you feel comfortable sharing about being in a long-term relationship, partnership with a pretty famous photographer? How does that affect things? And what can you talk about that you feel comfortable saying? You don't have to say anything if you don't want to.
No, it's funny. It's so normal to me. We support each other and we also keep our own space. I think the more time goes on, the more space we've created around our own work, but I don't do anything without asking what Mark thinks, and I don't think vice versa. But he's also so bottomless and infinite in his work that he's always pulling things out that brings me back to the past. He's showing me photos from decades ago that still feel so new and fresh to me, and I find a lot of inspiration in that. And then photography between us is like this constant ping pong within our lives,
Yeah, you've done a project together.
Yes, we just did a book together, but people don't write letters anymore. But I think our communications through the phone, where there's the shopping list or the broken this or that, and then, this like epiphany revelation photo of the sun coming up and reflecting in the dirty dishes on the counter. It's all mixed in, it's all like, it sounds so cliche, but sort of like art is in the life, in the folds, in the kind of musty, greasy folds of life. But this book that we did together was the first time that it was like an official sort of collaboration, and that's been kind of interesting. Yeah.
You want to tell people about the book?
Well, we were in Italy on this residency kind of commission, and we were photographing in different places, in very different ways. And then with this publisher, Shows Comune, Cecile, she's the publisher, and Stefani and Massimo in Italy, we went through some edits. And it's always kind of interesting to see how someone else shapes your personal work, but to how someone saw that collaboration and that wave that you can create with different kinds of images.
I wish I'd been asked to edit that. Very grr.
There's a lot of pictures left.
Okay, call me. Let's talk.
Yeah, and, also when you ask about things with Mark, it's just always fascinating and maddening to be in the same place at the same time, because we'll always photograph the same thing different times. And, I'll come home and be like, oh, did you see that pole on the corner? And he'll either run out and look at it, or be like, oh, yeah, I saw it, I photographed it. And then we'll have the same picture. And it's, the echo chamber is just booming.
Yeah, but that's beautiful, I think. It's very moving. So tell me about the Humid. I'd love for people to hear about that.
Well, that's that was Mark's promise for what Georgia held in store.
If you move down here.
If I moved down here, because I was happily, had my job in Boston and didn't think much of the cold and the shitty weather. And he said, no, it's really nice down there and we could have more space in the studio. And I had never had a studio. I was like, what would I do in a studio? And then bit by bit, we created the space, and we had our first workshop was with Baldwin Lee and Mike Smith. And I just remember I had this image, I'm walking the stroller, because our kid would only sleep in the stroller, and I was like looking at all these kudzu covered trees, and I was thinking, like, how do I write the Humid? We needed a font, things I had never thought about in my life. And it just all, we built it from scratch, and it's been
one of my favorite tote bags.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have a space, and it's horrific to say, but COVID was really good in that we got to do things online. We had artist talks with Christine Potter, and everything was so accessible online. So Saurabh Hura was in India, and Christine was in Nashville, and Carolyn Drake was on the West Coast, and we did a thing with her and Paul Sheik. And anyway, Dana Luxemburg was in Holland, and
all amazing people. I mean, I think the photography, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think the photography community is so unique this way in terms of, being able to constantly bolster community with these offerings and these creations, and all of a sudden something will pop up and exist for a year or two or 5 years and become such a great community building and knowledge center, and then another. Anyway, it feels like things are always building on themselves.
I agree with you. And I always, laughed at the word community in college because it was this buzzword. But I do believe that there is this need and hunger to interact and come together and correlate. And it's neat to have. We do these workshops and people show up from different places and they have good work. And because it used to be just grad school, and now, no, they have full-time jobs and they're doctors, but they have these amazing projects that they've been working on. And it's a great format to be able to share.
What does the Humid have coming up and when?
We have a in-person workshop in November, and I'm looking to I want to do another portfolio review. The last one was Teju Cole and Liv Constable from MAC, and Jackie Bates and Michael Famighetti from Aperture. So I'm hoping to do another one because that seems really helpful to people.
Yes.
And to share work.
Critique with great people.
And we did a workshop with Mark in France last summer. It was our first one. It was kind of just a lark, and so we hope to do another one this coming summer.
Nice.
In the south of France. Yeah, hopefully some online lectures too.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being with Michael Chauvin Dalton and I today. I can't just say Michael. It's just impossible.
That sounds like it's asking to be initials. MCD.
Yeah,
MCD.
It is MCD. It's so wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Sasha. Thanks for having me.
I'm It's just a joy. So, yep, thank you. And we'll see
Over
you
and
soon.
out. Yeah.
Over and out.
Thanks, guys.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is a production of the PhotoWork Foundation. Executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and the associate producer is Taylor Selsback. The show is also produced and edited by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. Music is by J. Walter Hawks. If you like the show and wish to find out more about the Foundation, please visit photowork.foundation and be sure to subscribe and review with all the stars on your listening platform.